Shalom. Parashat Korach is a complex web of political intrigue, sectarian movements, and moving pieces, which touch on Moshe, Aaron, priesthood, leadership, and nationhood. There's a machloket rishonim if this story unfolded only now, after the sin and punishment of the Meraglim, which is chronologically, or as Ibn Ezra opines, it has been brewing for a while, lurking behind the facade of unity, which we often point to when thinking about Bnei Yisrael and Har Sinai. Let's try to make sense and seder of the various mini-rebellions and attempt to understand God's ultimate message for his nation. Moshe is attacked internally by an evil mastermind, Korach, who brought together several groups of disgruntled members of the nation. Korach represented the priestly class, the Kohanim, who questioned Moshe's nepotism. God chose you, fine, but then you chose your brother? Rav lachem, ki kol hayada kulam kedoshim u'tocham Hashem, u'madua titnasu al kal Hashem. Moshe has to show Korach that not only were the Leviim chosen by God, but Aaron in particular, his leadership, was divinely chosen. That test of Machtot was created in order to prove Aaron's bona fides. He attempts to placate the Korachites, and all of them, and those with gripes about the priesthood, through the pans of Ketoret, but he's interrupted by an impatient God who calls for the destruction of everyone. Now at the same time, Korach takes another group and fuses them together with his rebellion, Datan and Abiram, and Bnei Ruvain, and the 250. Their challenge is, according to the Ramban, directed at Moshe himself for not leading, for not fulfilling the mission of bringing them into the promised land, for taking them out of one paradise and not bringing them to another. Hama'at ki elitanum eretz zavat chalav udvash lamitenu b'midbar ki tistarei aleinu kamistarer af lo eretz zavat chalav udvash haviyotenu v'titen lanu nachalat sadeh v'kerem ha'eni hanashim ha'em tinaker lo na'aleh. To them, Moshe must strike to the heart of their faith in God at choosing Moshe himself. A complicated argument to make, since he is by definition nogeh b'davar. He cannot use a test with them as with the Kohanim. Whereas Moshe's plan was to divide Korach and Datan v'Abiram, God's plan in Pasuk Kaf Gimel is to join together all the evil people, who thought that though they may have different motives, all seek the same goal: rebellion, anarchy, mutiny. Now God saw collective responsibility as the fabric which binds together a nation. And if some of the nations start an uprising and the nation does not act in support of Moshe, God, nationhood, then they're not worthy of being called Am Hashem. Thus he tells Moshe and Aaron that the entire Edom must be destroyed. Their last-ditch effort to avoid genocide comes in the form of one striking verse, together with a joint prostration seeking God's compassion. Vayiplu al pneihem vayomru el Elohei haruchot l'chol basar ha'ish achad yechata v'kol ha'am tiktzof. God at that moment gives in to Moshe and Aaron, but then demands that they too accept his position. If the entire nation is not at fault, then at least they must see the disparate mini-rebellions as part of one ultimate mutiny, which could not be ignored. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber le'edah lemor, he'alu misaviv le'mishkan Korach, Datan v'Abiram, putting them together. Vayikach Moshe vayelach el Datan v'Abiram v'elchu acharav ziknei Yisrael, vaydaber le'edah lemor, suru na me'al ohalei anashim harishayim ha'eleh, v'al tigu b'chol asher lahem, pen tisafu b'chol chatotam. There are not incongruous groups to be judged separately and individually. Rather, Korach, the sons of Ruvain, the 250 leaders, they all colluded. They all must suffer the same fate. But that fate must have an educational ring for the nation as well. All must understand the power of one's voice in enhancing and crystallizing a nation, or God forbid, in tearing it apart. Vayomer Moshe bezot tedun, ki Hashem shlachani la'asot et kol ha'masim ha'eleh, ki lo milibi. Im kmod kol ha'adam yimutun elu, fkudat kol ha'adam yipaked alehem, lo Hashem shlachani, God hasn't chosen me if they die naturally. V'im b'riah yivra Hashem. And if something new is created. Upatzta adama et piha. And the earth opens its mouth. Uvalautam, and swallows them. Ve'et kol asher lehem, v'yardu chaim she'ola. V'yidatem ki ni'atzu anashim ha'ele et Hashem. And then, vayihi kechaloto l'daber et kol advarim ha'ele, v'tipaka ha'adama, v'tiftach ha'aretz et piha, v'tivlautam. It happens exactly the way they expect. As a result of all this, Kol Yisrael asher svivotehem nasu kolam ki amru pen tivlaenu haaretz ve'esh yatsa me'et Hashem v'tochal 50-200 ish makrivei ketoret. The key words used by Moshe are B'riah Yivra Hashem, Patzta et Piha, and Uvala. The first expression is strange, B'riah, a new creation. Indeed, Rashi says it refers to the new way in which Datan and Abiram must learn of the consequences of their actions. Ramban agrees and notes that the ground opening, like an earthquake, is not at all a chidush. The bliyah, however, is. That it should swallow them up, that is not a natural phenomenon. All this is to let the nation know that at this critical point, a testing point of Moshe himself, God acts definitively, unwaveringly, with complete clarity. The next interesting phrase is a double one, patzta and bliyah, opening and swallowing. We find the unique word patzta referring to a few instances in Tanakh. Patzta, the earth opens its mouth in two places, in Korach, our parsha, and in Hevel's blood. V'ata arur ata min ha'adama asher patzta et piha, lakachat et dmei achicha miadecha. We also find it relating to a person who opens his mouth, Yiftach, who makes a vow and cannot take it back. V'anochi patziti pi el Hashem v'lo uchal lashuv. And Eov, in the mind of Elihu, one of the visitors and critics, opens his mouth, but it is Hevel to do so against God. V'Eov Hevel yiftze pihu bivlidat milin yachbir. Finally, the enemies of Jerusalem open their mouths and devour Israel. In this verse, we see the double language of patzu and bilanu, like in our parsha. In Eicha, patzu alayich pihem kol oivayich, sharku vayachraku shein, amru bilanu, achzeh hayom kivinu mitzaunu ra'inu. What do all these infractions have in common? That they deserve an unnatural opening of the earth and its swallowing people up. The Meforshim point to a midah keneged midah as the use and abuse of speech is the underlying sin. Cain attempts to speak, Vayomer Cain el hevel achiv, but fails to use the power of speech and resorts to violence. He then tried to conceal the blood within the earth. Therefore, the earth shall curse him eternally. Eov tries, with all of his courage and power, to control his mouth, to curb his mouth from opening up to God. He almost succeeds, but his few words which escape are picked up by Elihu and returned to him in caustic and uncompassionate rebuke. And then Eicha, when the text speaks of the enemy speaking out against Israel, but then debasing them even more with their whistling and their gnashing of their teeth, as a means to ridicule the downtrodden nation. Finally, Datan, Abiram, and Korach sin with the use of or abuse of our mouths. Potzeh peh umitzavtzef. These are the words of the Abarbanel. V'hinei ra'a Moshe levakesh shi'eh onesh Datan v'Abiram v'siyatam bivliyat haaretz ladunam midah keneged midah. Hem pashu b'ma shepa'aru pihem livli chok livloa ulhashchit adon hanevi'im liot be'erko nivzim v'shvelim kacha tipatach ha'adama shehi hashafel sheb'yisodot et piha v'tivla otam. The earth will swallow them up like their words were used in a inappropriate way. Our Rabbi Lichtenstein lived a life of nuance, of painstaking and exhaustive appreciation of all sides of an issue, of humility and complexity, and of choosing his words with accuracy and poignancy. He learned the message of the arrogance of Korach and the danger of opening one's mouth irresponsibly. We, his students, strive to live on his message in our writings, our teaching, our educating, and our worldview. I conclude echoing the words of Rabbi Sachs. We create worlds with words. When we speak disparagingly of others, we diminish them, we diminish ourselves, and we diminish the very ecology of freedom.